So ladies and gentlemen, we are now 1 month away from the release of Superman, and Entertainment Weekly has just done a massive piece on Superman, but also the broader DCU in the Wonder Woman realm, the somewhat kind of sequel to Superman, another tidbit about the Batman Part 2, all kinds of new things. So first up, very quickly here, this is pretty crazy. Superman pre-sale tickets have topped Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Captain America Brave New World by 1.5 times, and it's on par with the Batman, and that's without counting the Amazon Prime early screenings. But yes, you probably heard it already. Superman has sold more tickets in its first day than any other film in 2025. Deadline basically saying the same thing here. So no matter what, like, Superman tickets are doing very, very well, and this is getting people really, I would say, I still feel like it's kind of jumping the gun when it comes to box office. People are going all the way to, oh my god, 180 million international opening weekend, and what I think is that kind of crazy soaring through the sky box office opening weekend, international opening weekend, would depend on reviews. Now, don't get me wrong, ticket sales are doing incredibly well, like we just went over that, but when all the critic reviews come out, like, and that's being plastered everywhere, if it's like exceptionally amazing and people are gassing it up, Rotten Tomatoes, say what you will about that, but everywhere, including that place, including all critics, all outlets are like, this is actually really good. James Gunn's DCU is off to a great start. That's what will kind of soar it above the 130 to 150 plus mil mark, maybe to the quoted, predicted 170 million mark. But if it's kind of like some people saying, oh, you know, it's decent, it's good. Some people saying, oh, it's mid, but like worth checking out kind of thing. It's got kind of a bit of like a underwhelming but whelming vibe to it, not exceptionally great, that kind of vibe. That's what will probably keep it down to the 130, 120, closer to the $100 million global, international opening weekend. So I don't feel like you can instantly say, north of 150 mil, guaranteed. I think that would be amazing, obviously. But this is where those early reviews from those screenings, like multimedia screenings, early special screenings that critics attend, that's what will truly, be the carrying factor to launch it past 150 plus. The vibe is that it really could go way above 770, but I just don't want to set those expectations. But either way, ticket sales are insane. Let's just hope that the movie delivers. Okay, so now it's time to get into all the juicy details. I do want to forewarn you, I mean, you've probably seen it because of the video length, that this is going to be a deep dive. So strap yourselves in. First up here, DC and Gunn fans are craving no specifics, but the future appears bright for Superman and his pals in the DCU. David Zaslav, the head of Warner Brothers Discovery, got up in front of investors earlier this year and declared the Man of Steel as crucial to the longevity of this franchise, as are Supergirl, Batman, and Wonder Woman. But this is when Entertainment Weekly then say, when asked if he's already thinking of a sequel, Gunn replies, what I'm working on is in some way, I mean, yes, but is it a straight up Superman sequel? I would not say necessarily. So we've actually heard Gunn say this before, just in different ways. So this is, bringing up that news again, but it kind of reignites the fire of speculation. So many people are assuming that since he described it in that way, it's going to be World's Finest. And sure, I completely understand that speculation. The thing is, I'm still very inclined to believe that, all while it could absolutely still be World's Finest, you have to remember that there can be, as Gunn said, in some way a sequel, but is it a straight up Superman sequel? Not necessarily, with regards to the Justice Gang characters, building up to more of a Justice League International expanded kind of influence. Don't forget, and try and remove your bias for wanting a World's Finest movie, that would literally be related to Superman in a not so straight up kind of non-sequel-esque project to Superman, yet kind of sequel vibe as Gunn was describing and implying there. So all I'm saying is, I think we just shouldn't assume, oh my god, World's Finest automatically. But then, ladies and gentlemen, Entertainment Weekly ask, But what about Bruce Wayne and Diana Prince? Already announced for development are a film inspired by Grant Morrison's Batman and Son comic, as well as a Paradise Island HBO series about the Amazons of Themyscira. The latter is slowly moving, but it's moving, Gunn says, while confirming a Wonder Woman movie is being written right now. So rejoice, Wonder Woman fans! The DCU Wonder Woman movie is now being written. We finally got bloody confirmation about it. So depending on how swimmingly that writing process goes, we could be hearing about the casting of that movie sometime next year, which you'd have to assume would be the case. So get your Wonder Woman fan castings in the comments section. I mean, I still quite like Adria Arjona for the role. I think people have been really perplexed as to why we haven't heard about one of the main characters of DC, Wonder Woman, sooner. But now you have the reassurance that she is having a project being developed. Let me know what you would like to see developed for a brand new Wonder Woman movie. You know, I know this is very early, and to be honest, all of this news at the moment is going to launch a whole new discussion series episode, DCU discussion series episode on the channel. So I might take some of your comments here as well. What villain, what arc, all of that stuff would you like to see? Bearing in mind that this, you can't forget, is a DCU that's already existed with metahumans and heroes for a while. So Diana's Wonder Woman would have been a thing for a minute, so she would have already faced some characters. Would you like Anya Chalotra's Cersei to be involved? And Future Boba again, there's going to be quite a bit of frickin' Future Boba in this video. I felt like I had to include this because somebody would type, "You ignored the new Mr. Miracle news." No. But there's just so much to talk about. Warner Brothers, Animation, and DC Studios order adult animation series, Mr. Miracle. Now, this is really cool. Mr. Miracle getting his own animated series is freaking awesome. The thing is, I've gone to every major outlet, at least as of when I'm making this little clip right now. They haven't stated whether it's in the DCU like Creature Commandos, the animated series, is canonically connected to the live action. Now, more on that in just a second. Warner Brothers Animation and DC Studios have greenlit Mr. Miracle, an adult animated series based on a 12-issue Eisner Award-winning comic from writer Tom King and artist Mitch Gerard. So it's based on Tom King's run here, and they say it follows recent animated series that they've also greenlit, such as DC Studios' Starfire, My Adventures with Green Lantern, and DC Superpowers, and none of those are connected to the DCU, so you see why I'm hesitant about it. Now, the Hollywood Reporter here go on to say that the new series follows Scott Free, the world's greatest escape artist known to the world as Mr. Miracle, whose perfect life with his warrior wife, Big Barda, falls apart when their two homeworlds, Apocalypse and New Genesis, go to war, and Scott's cruel adoptive father, Darkseid, appears to have captured the ultimate weapon, the anti-life equation that will give him total dominance over the universe. As the mountains of bodies on both sides grow even higher, only Mr. Miracle can stop the slaughter and restore peace. But the terrible power of the anti-life equation may already be at work in his own mind, warping reality, exposing his long-buried pain, and shattering the fragile happiness he's found with the woman he loves. So, again, adult Mr. Miracle series, sick plot, but I just can't help but think, are we really gonna, sure, some people have said to me on Twitter when I first said, I don't know if it's going to be connected to the DCU. Well, that doesn't mean that technically they're not going to introduce Mr. Miracle canonically in animation out there in the universe, New God style, show that there is a thing going on with Apocalypse and New Genesis and Mr. Miracle and Darkseid. That doesn't necessitate Darkseid's presence in the DCU, does it? No, it just means that Mr. Miracle might come over to Earth and join the future Justice League or Justice Gang turning into Justice League International type thing that could be ever-growing under Maxwell Lord. So I'm leaning towards this not being canon to the DCU. That doesn't matter to me, by the way, because I really am still liking the sound of this series. I think it would be really cool, though, at the same time to have Mr. Miracle in the DCU. So let me know any theories, what you would like to happen. Do you think there would literally be a presence of... Well, technically, Darkseid is out there somewhere, right? So they could make this DCU without having to bring him over into the larger actual present-day canon side of things. So we've got a lot more to get into in this video from past Boba and some more future Boba, I'm sure, peppered throughout this. It's a big one. But now moving on to a little bit of a side note here in this video, into the Elseworlds side of things, as Gunn goes on to talk about the Batman 2. So Gunn hasn't yet cast the DCU's Batman or Wonder Woman, but notes that Robert Pattinson is still there in director Matt Reeves' corner of the DC franchise. Although there have been many delays, Pattinson will return for the Batman Part 2. Meanwhile, Reeves continues to build out his Batman epic crime saga, a series of movies and shows including The Penguin that remains separate from the main DCU franchise's story continuity. What Matt's doing is still really important, despite all stories to the contrary. We're supposed to see that script shortly, and I can't wait. Now, you may have noticed a little bit of emphasis on some of those words, just because, it's like whack-a-mole. No matter what, people could be like, oh, I had a comment recently saying, oh, it's so cute that you still think this movie's happening. I swear to God, man. I swear to God. I swear. Now, what I will say, what we got out of this is a script still hasn't been handed in by Memorial Day, as so the rumor went recently. Although, to be fair, just to chuck this in for the sake of it, I'm not sure when they actually conducted this big Entertainment Weekly article and interviews, so it could have been a little while ago in advance of the article release. But even if Matt Reeves didn't submit the script, the draft, by Memorial Day, once again, I am going to hammer down on this, especially another update here, that this is still encouraging. Not only did James Gunn on Threads a few weeks ago say that there is encouraging updates about the Batman Part 2 behind the scenes, but we've got another update here of him literally saying, we are supposed to see that script shortly, and I can't wait. So it's right around the corner. And once Gunn sees it, it will hopefully get the all-clear green light into pre-production. And when that begins, I'm going to once again now hammer down on this as well. We will still be on track with regards to filming likely taking place early next year, let's say roughly March-ish. So the script being seen soon, let's say, I don't know, by the end of July, March 2026 filming would still be 8 months away from that date, of let's just say it got submitted in July. So everyone saying things like, oh my God, just make the movie already, or can it? Well, technically they are, and they're on track with the current projection of ramp up to pre-production and then filming, and then, as we know, the 2027 October release date, which is freaking ages away. As I keep saying, you may have heard me say this 50 times, we should hear something concrete by the next couple of months, July, August-ish, and then hopefully into pre-production. We'll hear about casting towards the end of this year. I know some of you just won't believe it till you see it. I can't blame you. But as I outlined, technically right now, things are going according to the timeline of where they need to be for a 2027 October release. And I think Gunn would be pretty damn crazy for him to say all of this kind of stuff for it to not remotely turn out to be true. But I know some of you out there are like, well, I don't buy what he's saying at all. It's so cute that you believe the Batman Part 2 is, I swear to God. Now, the next detail of note here is the master plan for Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. So Entertainment Weekly say, that said, he does have a master plan in terms of the titles comprising gods and monsters. The most important thing is the specific stories, but there is also a much bigger story that we're telling that will take a little bit longer to tell, he remarks. That's sort of where my next couple of things are going to be. So Gunn is doubling down here, literally saying that there is a bigger story that they're telling that will take a bit longer to tell. So this still does adhere and link to the 2023 comments of where they say Lanterns is very important to their overall story that they're telling between movies and TV shows. And we know there's some kind of ancient horror teased in that. So, I think this all just has come full circle. It's still a plan. The chapter is Gods and Monsters is still very much so a thing, but there is also absolutely a focus on individual projects. As he says, the most important thing is specific stories. He just wants to nail that. But of course, there is an overarching master plan. And it's curious that he says that's where his next couple of things are going to be. At least that he's working on. This could link back to what I was saying, that Gunn's next project. What if it's not World's Finest, but rather, let's say it is furthering on more of a Justice League International inspired, I'm not saying an actual JLI, like Justice League International project, but some kind of inspired thing where whatever that story is, it kind of goes and leans more into whatever the overarching kind of big bad or big threat or whatever thing that the heroes of the DCU need to deal with. And it's more and more teased from Lanterns, maybe Peacemaker, but further into the next couple of things he's going to do. So it's good hearing that, but this is where we get some Justice League comments. So Entertainment Weekly say, could it involve something that does justice to this league of superheroes he's assembling? Is Justice League on James Gunn's mind? Of course, he responds. But there is no Justice League in this world. Not yet. Is it fair to say the Justice League relates to Gunn's larger plans for the Gods and Monsters phase of the DCU? Again, he offers a sly reply, sure. That's a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, we've heard that quote before of Gunn saying to a different interviewer that the Justice League doesn't exist. Not yet. Obviously, if you're doing a DCU, you will do a Justice League at some point in time. So this is information we've already worked with. We know that there's literally not a Justice League right now. That doesn't technically rule out if Batman's already familiar with someone like Wonder Woman. And I'm sure that the overarching big story, the master plan, is what's going to bring these characters together. Like, they're going to need to band together, but what is it? Are we going to go back to speculation about the center and things like that? You never know. Like a Justice League New Frontiers situation. Now, speaking of the biggest story in the DCU, well, we have Entertainment Weekly talk about Superman and Peacemaker's events and how they impact the biggest story of the DCU. Last year's Creature Commandos on Max, soon to be renamed HBO Max, was technically the first project within this initial phase of the new DCU, which has been dubbed Gods and Monsters. But Gunn says the animated series is not necessarily crucial to this larger storytelling plan. The events of Superman, as well as this fall's Peacemaker Season 2, however, are both pretty important in terms of getting to the bigger story, he says. Now, that's really exciting to me for a bonus reason, really, because I'm already quite excited about Peacemaker Season 2. Really loved the first season, way more than I ever thought I would, right? But Peacemaker having an impact on this bigger story. I wonder what that will be. I can't wait to break down those episodes even more now, kind of also speculating and theory crafting as we love to do about how it will contribute and have a bigger impact on the DCU's overall story. Now, another thing that stood out to me about this article is when Gunn talks about metahumans once again, giving us even more context. And what I mean by once again is we've already heard him say that they've been around for a long time and there's more of them today than there used to be. But now in this article, we hear them say, in this world, humanity has been clued into the existence of metahumans for 300 years, Gunn reveals. If you saw a shark man walking down the street, you'd probably vomit and shit yourself to death, he says. If they saw one, it would be more like if you saw Paul McCartney on the sidewalk in New York. So 300 years as a firm time is pretty cool. And also that's 300 years of metas, man. That's pretty nuts. But I also really like his analogy in terms of how people are clearly used to it in this DCU. Sure, seeing a metahuman like King Shark would turn your head, but not nearly as much as it would dumbfound us if we saw a meta like that in our world. We would be like, what the... Now, as for the Justice Gang, we have Entertainment Weekly saying it's a world that includes the Justice Gang, a super trio comprised of Hawkgirl, Kendra Saunders, Green Lantern Guy Gardner, and Mr. Terrific Michael Holt. But they went corporate. Maxwell Lord, the head of Lord Tech and one of the multiple tech billionaires in this world, is their backer. They're good, they just are not saintly, Gunn says of the team. So I think it's interesting that they're acknowledged officially now as corporate, or they went corporate, which, as we broke down a long time ago now, has influences from DC Comics in that of the conglomerate, and also maybe a bit of a smidge of Justice League International, but not so much, but obviously with Maxwell Lord's inclusion there. Now, speaking of going corporate, it continues to say it answers the question, how do superheroes make their money? Fillion says. Corporate sponsorship seems pretty in line with what I would imagine. There's really no paycheck for being a superhero, but you gotta pay rent, right? And this is very, very true. And again, it does take influence from the comics. You have heroes like Superman, who is also Clark Kent, the Daily Planet reporter, so he gets a paycheck there, although, it's pretty shocking as to how he doesn't get fired half the time. But the reality is, if you are a superhero, you are also going to be at the beck and call of any situation and might have to abandon your job, and, how do you hold down the job that way? So I do like that this is being entertained. I'm not saying corporate sponsorship should always be the way forward, but this is and has been a question in superhero media for a while. And leaning more into this line of thinking, they say the actor, also known for his work on The Rookie, doesn't want to spoil too much of the film, but notes a scene that takes place in Justice Gang headquarters. There are boxes in the background that they're clearly unpacking, so it's like they're getting things set up. It seems like this is a new arrangement, that it's all starting, and Guy Gardner is extremely happy about it. And this is what I mean, I think, with Guy Gardner also being kept in check with this new enterprise. He likes the idea of a team like this, so while he can be arrogant, I think he also doesn't want to spoil it, which is why he takes on board what Kendra, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific might disapprove of with the way he's been acting at certain points. And as for the Justice Gang headquarters, it makes me wonder. I really am wondering, could that possibly be the Hall of Justice location we know that they were basically filming at, the real-life location that inspired the Hall of Justice location in the comics? I wonder if they are setting up the base of operations there, as they explain here. It's a new thing. Guy Gardner is extremely happy about it. They're kind of unpacking. They're getting things set up. It is, giving me more food for thought as to why Gunn's next project could be about the continuation of this group expanding out, and yeah, sure, maybe no longer being called the Justice Gang. It really is kind of a working title, the vibes that I'm getting from all of the information we're getting here. But I just really wouldn't be surprised if that continues to develop. You do get more characters in it, and I would still love to know any theories on that, rather than just assuming world's finest. We have a little bit of a bonus interview with Nathan Fillion saying something about Guy Gardner in Lanterns, saying, I think he feels a little bit higher strung in Lanterns. I've done a scene in Lanterns, we filmed it already, where he's contently smug. It's neat to see him in different environments and how those different environments will affect a character. And that's something I've always been super fascinated with, knowing that Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner is going to be in Lanterns, just because Lanterns being an HBO show, so this really high prestige, show, at least that's what they're aiming for, with a more true detective adult tone. Seeing Superman's Guy Gardner in that, it's like, how will he act? I'm sure he still will act like Guy Gardner, but you have to be careful to not almost give a completely different tone with a completely wackier, smug character. But hearing him say this now, it kind of makes even more sense, where he's got to adjust his attitude a bit, but it also fits with the other characters. I'm sure what he means here, well, potentially, is that seeing him in a different environment and how those environments will affect his character, perhaps Guy Gardner is more contently smug rather than over-the-top smug in Superman, for example, when he's around Hal Jordan. I love the idea that if you have an emergency and you need a Green Lantern, there's thousands of them out there in the galaxy. This is the last one you want, Fillion, who's voiced multiple animated Lanterns throughout his career, says of this iteration. What is very true about Guy Gardner, and what James understands very well, is you don't have to be good and pure of heart to be a Green Lantern. You just have to be fearless. You just have to have the will. And Guy Gardner thinks he can take on Superman. That's how fearless he is. no, you can't take on Superman, dude. Now, as for the dynamic between the Justice Gang, Githegi acknowledges that Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific are not typically paired together. They've got different skill sets, they've got different personalities, they've got different moral codes, so I think there's some inherent conflict because of how different everyone is, but then that also breeds fun. Entertainment Weekly goes on to say here, by the time we meet the Justice Gang, the other members are already sick of Guy's crap. Guy Gardner's famously an arsehole, so he's not really liked by anybody except for Guy Gardner, which is really fun, Githegi comments. Nathan Fillion is so perfectly cast, and the scenes that I had with him, I'm convinced that he's just going to blow everyone away. They seem to know how to handle him very well, Fillion comments of the other Justice Gang members. They certainly don't take him extremely seriously. It's a lot of eye rolling, but not behind Guy Gardner's back, to his face, which you can respect. These are not people who get steamrolled. These are people who are keeping Guy on a tight leash. So that's pretty interesting to hear, because we were thinking about how Superman's gonna maybe butt heads with Guy Gardner, which is certainly gonna happen, and we don't know so much about the other Justice Gang members. I mean, if anything, he seems to be getting along with Mr. Terrific quite a bit. But I like the idea of them butting heads with each other, especially with regards to the comment of keeping Guy Gardner on a leash, and they're eye-rolling to him, and they don't shy away from letting him see that, and he respects that, and he knows that he almost needs to be kept in check a little bit, despite how arrogant he can be sometimes. Now, continuing on here, by comparison, Mr. Terrific is one of the most philosophically compelling heroes in DC, in Githegi's opinion. He's an atheist who believes in justice, Githegi describes his character. He loses his wife, and he found meaning in knowledge. He saw that while the universe might be cruel, intelligence, science, and innovation could make it better. He chose to become hope rather than succumbing to the despair of losing his wife. Now, I just know, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, that Eddie Githegi, well, he's going to be great, but I feel like there's going to be a line where maybe he references his wife, and I know that will probably make me tear up, because Eddie Githegi is just so good. He really is really good, so I'm so glad that he's got this new shot at being another superhero in this universe now, and I think he's going to own the role. Big fan of his, have been for a long time. Watch For All Mankind if you haven't already. He's great in that. Now, as for Hawkgirl, Merced's Hawkgirl, who has wings sprouting from her back and a mace at the ready, is the warrior of the gang. You don't really get to know her that well, and I think that's good, Merced says. James isn't showing all of his cards. He's saving a lot of that. Now, I think some people might be a bit concerned about this, because one of the concerns about the cast that we have in Superman is that you might not get maybe a satisfactory or some satisfaction if you're a huge fan of a certain character. And so with her saying you don't really get to know her that well, I don't know if that's going to cause some red flags for some people, but Isabella Merced is saying that's good. James isn't showing all of his cards. He's saving a lot of that. And I don't think that's just saving it for Peacemaker, because Peacemaker, I think you're not really going to get to know her well either, because I suspect it is just that small scene. But I suspect that James Gunn, as we went into earlier, his next somewhat sort of sequel, but not really sequel to Superman, could involve her character. Now, even more on Kendra, in another article, we have Isabella Merced say it's like a day job for her in a way. She treats the Justice Gang as such, and it's fascinating to see it through that lens. But there's even more on Hawkgirl here, which I'm not going to pretend to be a Hawkgirl guru. Every time I try and understand it, I feel like at some point in the past, with the different iterations of the character and the way they do her past lives, or the different versions of Hawkgirl that there is. But here, we have an interesting kind of mishmash of what they're doing with Hawkgirl. And I don't know if this is going to alienate Hawkgirl fans, or they're going to find it like an interesting thing, so let me know down in the comments below. Armed with a mace, Kendra Saunders is a warrior, reincarnated, we're on track here, but from a Thanagarian, a race of winged humanoid aliens from the planet Thanagar. She bears all the memories of her past lives. She has that past of being Thanagarian. And that's important because you want to make sure she has that military kind of vibe, but also, she's a modern girl, which I do think is pretty interesting, instead of having the whole Thanagarian, Thanagar iteration as a separate iteration. It's kind of like a part of Kendra's past lives that she's remembering. I don't know. Again, I don't want to speak with any confidence about stuff like this, but I just know that it is a convoluted continuity of iterations, and maybe you guys could, help me out, or like, let me know how you feel about the iterations there have been on Hawkgirl in the past, and how you feel about her literally being a reincarnated version of a Thanagarian, still adhering to having all the memories of her past lives, yet also having her own modern-aged life, and as she calls herself, a modern girl, which is, it is an interesting character in of itself. I just don't know how this will line up to the thinking of maybe what some Hawkgirl fans would have wanted from the DCU's version. Entertainment Weekly then go on to say what we kind of already know. Fillion will then pop over to HBO's Lanterns, and Gathegi also confirms that Superman isn't the only project that I'll be in. I wonder if it's what Gunn is doing next. I think it very well could be. So you're seeing some future Boba here, like wearing the same hoodie. So I don't know if you can tell. Like, I'm adding little bits and pieces into this video to archive all of the new stuff that's got. There's just a lot of new stuff. But we've also had new details of Gunn and the cast sitting down in a Fandango interview, giving us some details which I've been wondering about for a while. So when talking about introducing a whole new world with the DCU, Gunn says, now we're just picking up on the story of one particular superhero 3 years after he comes on the scene, who happens to be the most powerful metahuman of all time. So there we have it. We finally have our answer of how long David Corenswet Superman has been active. He's been active for 3 years. So again, a Superman who's still becoming not an origin, but by all means, he's still not had, 3 years is quite a bit of experience being exposed to the world, helping out the world, but he's still not a veteran. And 3 years is still, again, a bit of time. Like, could he have actually already interacted with characters like Wonder Woman and Batman? They're certainly aware of one another with an established DCU already that has 300 years of metahuman history. And next up, we finally have confirmation of who this bloody creature is. So when talking about seeing Corenswet in the Superman suit and how in awe Nicholas Holt's son was of seeing that, they also acknowledged how his favorite character, Holt's son, was known as Mr. Handsome. So Gunn then says, Mr. Handsome is Lex's creature he created in a petri dish that drives around on this flying platform. The ugliest, grossest creature in the world. Also, I remember one of our producers, her son also was just obsessed with Mr. Handsome. So there we have it, Mr. Handsome. That is apparently an ugly creature that Lex created out of a petri dish. I think this absolutely furthers the theories of the whole Ultraman creation thing. If he's literally creating Mr. Handsome out of a petri dish, then, why was he doing that? What DNA was he experimenting with? Maybe something to create a similar powered being to match the Man of Steel. They take the opportunity to ask Gunn about Ultraman, and they say Gunn continues this air of mystery, but the character has comparable abilities to Superman. When asked if Ultraman is Luthor's attempt to create his own Man of Steel, the filmmaker replies, I think that's close. Ultraman is sort of Lex's thug and is pretty powerful. Now, up next, I wanted to talk about the extra insight we get of the interview scene featured in the official trailer. We hear that it's a meaty scene, about 10 to 12 pages worth of script, in which Lois arrives at her apartment to find her boyfriend, Clark Kent, attempting, rather poorly, to cook an anniversary meal. Their playful banter highlights their romantic chemistry, but also how they challenge each other. We're meeting them at a point where they've been together for about 3 months, Brosnahan notes, which is the point in a relationship where you're like, was this really a great fling, or is this, more serious? Possibly forever. Now, just before continuing, together for 3 months and she knows he's Superman is still kind of wild to me. Like, I really hope we get some kind of inkling as to how Lois found out. Like, did she figure it out herself so Clark couldn't really avoid it? And all while I acknowledge Clark is head over heels in love with this woman, if Clark revealed it to her, like, after only 3 months, 12 weeks, how did he know if they didn't work out if she would keep his secret? That's the kind of thing I'm wondering where, in a lot of Superman material that, keep it secret, keep it safe with regards to his abilities is such a huge part of his upbringing that it's like, oh no, 12 weeks in, Clark already folds to Lois. But that's, she could have found it out herself because she's Lois Lane. Continuing on, Lois gives Clark grief for the ethical breaches of his recent Daily Planet pieces. Exclusive interviews he conducted with Superman, though they both know full well that Clark is Superman, so he offers her an alternative. She can interview him as the Man of Steel instead. What he thinks might be a fun bonding moment backfires spectacularly as Lois, who comes alive when presented with a juicy story, jumps at the chance to ask Superman hard-hitting questions on the record. And just side note here, I kind of love how Clark, we already know that he's doing his own interviews with Superman, and as almost like an anniversary present, he's like, yeah, sure, you can do the interview with Superman this time around, but it kind of ruins the anniversary. Now, when talking about how this Superman is giving a bit of a fresh take, if you will, and where he's usually, as the article says, this Titan from Krypton, and that can seem very stoic in various iterations, Corenswet's Kal-El can be quite passionate about his views and express them loudly. I had the same idea about Superman, that he's quite reserved and has ultimate control over his emotions and his reaction to things, Corenswet says. I was very excited when James said all of that is true about Superman, but we get to meet him in this moment where those things are the least true. That's where he's a little bit of Superman, he's a little bit of Clark, because the only other person in the room knows who he is and holds all the cards. So I really like that as well. Clark obviously still has stuff to learn, but he's still intrinsically Superman, but he's a bit more passionate. But also, as I've said about this movie, this is still, while not an origin story, a Superman who is still becoming. Now, there is so much more information, but I'm gonna have to skim past some of it. But getting into Luthor, Gunn says that Lex is connected to everything. There's nothing bad happening in Metropolis during this movie that doesn't have some connection to Lex Luthor. Now, the article also talks about the All-Star Superman inspirations of Lex Luthor, where they specifically hone in on that panel where Superman goes to Lex when he's in prison and he's been using that time to work out a lot. Or should I say Clark does that interview. And we have Lex say in those panels, feel that, Kent? Real muscles, not like his. It's easy to be strong when you just happen to have come from the planet Krypton. This takes hard work. And Nicholas Hoult says this about that scene. That kind of captures, in my mind, the element of Lex. He's worked hard and diligently for so many years for all these things, to be admired and to be adored. Then suddenly Superman's turned up and he's all the things that he aims to be himself in some ways, but he doesn't have to work hard for it. So I'm like, what if this Lex is someone who is physically strong and is an alpha, or seemingly in that sense, instantly? Even in the prep phase, it was like, I'm going to get in the gym and I'm going to be as strong as I possibly ever can be by the time we start shooting. And what can I say? Cannot wait for Nicholas Hoult to own this role. Now, there is even more details that I will probably get into in the next video. And I know there's TV spots as well, so just bear with me while I get to that video. But I hope you enjoyed today's breakdown. There is so much to talk about, and there's still so much more to talk about. So I would really appreciate it if you hit like on the video, consider subscribing. There's a lot happening in the future over the next couple of years, so it'd be great to have you along for the ride. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.